Oh, now that's what I'm talking about right there. A beautiful cinnamon swirl bread. Howdy folks, welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode, we're going to be making a cinnamon swirl bread. This is an old world recipe, guys. It predates me and predates my mom. Okay, this goes way back. It's a wonderful recipe. It's delicious. The bread is cinnamony and sweet. The swirl inside is yummy. And when it's toasted up with a little butter, man, it is unbelievable. So I'll tell you what. Let me teach you how to make a wonderful bread that you're going to fall in love with. It's great for the holidays, fun for kids. It's a good recipe. So guys, let's get in the kitchen and get busy baking this up. Come on. All right, guys, there it is. Wonderful ingredients. This is a fun recipe to make. Now, we're going to start with our flour. You can use either a bread flour or you can use an all-purpose flour. They both work wonderful for this. Your bread flour is going to give you a little more stretch to the dough, a little more stretch in the inner fibers of the dough, which is common for good quality breads. The all-purpose flour gives you a little bit lighter effect. It's not quite as stretchy, but it's still a very good dough. So both flours are going to work fine. We use a lot of it. It's a 5 to 6 cup recipe. Now that kind of throws you there, doesn't it? 5 to 6 cups, which is it? A cup of flour is a lot of flour. Well, here's the thing, guys. Flours are fickle, okay? I can't help that. It's just the way the industry is. So if you buy the same bag of flour, months later, and it's a different lot, and it comes from a different batch of wheat, well, the funny thing is the hydrating levels or the hydrating qualities of that flour relative to the first flour that you bought are going to be slightly different, even in that same brand. And that's because, like I said, flour is fickle. It depends on the crop. It depends on the amount of rain it had that year. It depends on the structure of the wheat and which flour or which wheat they used for that flour. And so also big differences between brands. And this is where the art of baking begins, because you're looking for a certain quality and a certain texture in the dough itself. So what we'll do is when we're measuring our flour and working it out, we're going to reserve a little bit to the back and work it into the dough as needed until we get the right texture, and then we start our rising process. Onto these other ingredients. So 5 to 6 cups of flour, 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of water. On your other ingredients, you'll have butter. We need 3 tablespoons of butter for this recipe, guys. And let me mention, this is 2 loaves. So if you want to make 1 loaf, all you have to do is just half this recipe. 3 tablespoons of sugar. 2 teaspoons of salt. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. 5 teaspoons of yeast. If you're thinking, hold it, most packets of yeast are 2 1/4 teaspoons, so how am I going to work that out? Hey, when I work out my recipes many years ago, and this was when I was back in high school, I used bulk yeast a lot, so I measured everything by the teaspoon, and I didn't do it relative to how much is in a packet, and that was really bad on me. But 2 packets of yeast will suffice perfectly for this recipe, okay? It was just my original recipe uses 5 teaspoons, so if you're dishing it from bulk, try it that way. The cinnamon swirl on the inside is going to have a few ingredients also. So I have a stick of butter that's coming to room temperature. I have a 1/2 cup of sugar here and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and that's going to be worked together in a wonderful way to make the interior swirl of each of our breads. And as I mentioned, this makes 2 loaves. So if you want to cut this recipe in half and work it 1 loaf at a time, That's a great way of doing it. I've done that before. Also, something that needs to be said, if you don't have a mixer to work this, definitely cut the recipe in half. The mixers are fabulous, and I used to do a lot of these two-batch recipes when it came to dough because I had a large mixer that was capable of handling that, but not everybody does. So if you have a smaller mixer, then you might want to just consider going half batches on this and doing it one at a time. Guys, let's get into making this fabulous tasting bread. Come on. Okay guys, it's time for us to mix everything together here. Now I have out a dish with hot water. That's 1 cup, and this is 1 cup of room temperature milk. I'm going to mix in, and you can use a spoon for this. I'm going to use a whisk. I'm going to mix in my other ingredients. What I want to do is start with this butter, which is kind of warm. I just melted this. So I just melted that in the microwave, guys. And now it's cool enough for me to go ahead and add the other stuff. So there I work in my sugar and my yeast also. And you might think, hey, this is a faux pas. He's using a metal implement on yeast. Well guys, it's not in contact with that long. Okay, so that yeast is just fine. But what I've done is I have fixed up my liquid and starter. Now once I have this mixed up, I can just let it sit aside for a little bit. It'll be just fine, guys. What's happening there is that yeast is waking up, and it's got something in there to eat. It's got some nutrient inside of it. That nutrient is the milk, and of course it's got a lot to eat, and that's that sugar that's inside of there, so it's going to allow it to blossom. And while it's busy doing its thing, I need to focus on my flour. Alright guys, I think we need to take care of sifting off our flour. Now, what we got here, I have my old antique sifter. I love to use this old thing, it's just fun. And a big bowl for my flour to work it all into. My spices here. If you don't have a sifter, look, you can use one of these. This is a plain old strainer. Just set it on your bowl, measure your ingredients into this, and take this and tilt it slightly downward and bump it with your hand. What'll happen is as you tilt it, it'll pull, as you bump it rather, with it tilted, it still pulls that flour up. So just do it this way and it will sift it right down into your bowl beautifully, okay? So you don't have to have a sifter itself. I will start by measuring off into my sifter a couple of cups of my flour. There we go. Now watch what I do. I'm going to scrape this off, give it a gentle tap, and that tells me whether or not there was an air pocket in there. If it didn't drop, no air pocket. That's 2 cups of flour. What I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and I'm going to put my cinnamon onto this, and I'm going to get my salt on there. I'll work that down. There we go. Now all I'll have to do, it's number 4. This is number 5. Now guys, since I have my 5 cups of flour already in there, what I'm going to do is pull out another ½ cup approximately. There we go, another ½ cup. Gently place that over the top. If a little goes over, not a big deal. Now what this does is we're doing 2 things. A, we're combining our salt and that cinnamon into our flour. Not well, but we're combining it to it. And the other thing is I'm making sure there's no lumps in the flour. The third thing is I'm making sure that the flour is light and fluffy. Okay, so we've removed anything we don't want. We've made the flour light and fluffy. We've gotten our ingredients mixed in there, and we're ready to go on this. So we left out that 1/2 cup of flour, and what I want to do is I'm just going to pull out a little bit of flour and I'm going to set it aside so that later, as I'm working my recipe, if it seems too moist, I will have a little flour to work into it, okay? Let's get on to mixing this up. Alright guys, we're here with the mixer. Now, as I mentioned to you before, this is a large recipe. This is 2 loaves worth of dough. And if you don't have a large mixer, working it by hand can be, well, it can be work, okay? Now, if we look inside of this, you'll notice the top has become kind of frothy and foamy. And what that is that's that yeast rising up with the butter covering it, okay? So it's looking yummy, delicious. And what I'm gonna do, I'm going to get all of this liquid down in this bowl right here. We'll scrape the sides of this because some of my butter and my yeast have congealed over to the sides. Okay guys, now keep that spatula handy. You may be needing it in a little bit. What I'm going to do with my flour here is I'm going to take it and just put it right down in this. But I'm going to scoop it in, as you're seeing here. There we are. So I have all of my ingredients in my mixer ready to go at it, and I have this on the side. If you're doing it by hand, you can start this with that spatula. Just go to turning it in your bowl and you're all right. I went many years back, got myself one of these mixers for this reason that I got sick and tired of mixing dough by hand, and this was an absolute joy because I got it. Always, always, always start on the slowest setting, guys, especially when you got a lot of flour in there, because it'll throw it everywhere. Now let's take a close look. As you can see, just now getting started, and what'll look like an absolute mess, there we go. What's going to look like an absolute mess at first is going to turn into a beautiful, satiny, smooth loaf. The color will be due to the cinnamon, and the flavor, oh my goodness, off the hook. As you've seen, this hasn't been running very long, okay guys? It's been a very short period of time. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lift that up, take my dough hook off, and I simply want to feel the dough, okay? What I'm doing is I'm seeing how sticky it is. It's not sticking to my hands, all right? That's a very good sign, and it tells me I don't really have to have that other flour. Maybe, okay? I'm gonna give this about 3 to 4 more minutes of kneading, and at the end of that, if it feels like it's too wet and it's sticking to me too much, then I'll add a little more flour. Other than that, I don't really think I'm going to need this, except for when I go to rolling it out. Okay guys, there we have it. It didn't take very long. Let me check my dough. It looks like it's coming off of there wonderfully. If you can pull it off of your dough hook like that, then that's a really good sign. See how I'm just turning it under, folding it in on itself? That's perfectly fine. Great way of kneading it. So what I do is I pinch that bottom off where I folded everything under like this. Boom. Now this is ready to go down into my bowl that I'm going to rise in, okay guys? So let me show you how to prepare that next. For the meantime, I can set it right there. It'll be just fine. Okay guys, I have here a little bit of all vegetable shortening, and I'm just going to scoop some up in my hand. What I need to do is to grease the bowl I'm going to rise it in, and the pans, I'm going to cook it in. So, a little bit of this inside of here. Now you notice I don't put a whole lot, I'm just gently rubbing it around to start with. And I'll do the same thing on these, just get a little bit in there. Okay, now, I pretty much used up that tablespoon. So all I need to do is just to simply work it around. It doesn't take a thick coat, guys, very, very thin coat. Same thing on my pans. And I'm just going to set these aside for later. They don't need to be used immediately, but they can be pre-greased and ready to go. And I think doing it at the same time that I do this just makes it a little easier. I get it all done at once. Yeah, that was greased and ready to go. One more. Now there we go. Wasn't that easy? Now if you'll notice, I use a glove when I do this, and that's on purpose, guys. I have done so much cooking over time, I've learned that when you want to move on quickly, doing that's faster than washing your hands. My dough goes in this, and I take a bowl and cover it. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put this in a warm location. I have what's called a standing pilot stove, so it works great if I just put mine on a baking sheet and put it right over that pilot, and it keeps it at the perfect temperature. It gives me a faster rise. You don't have to do that, guys. If you've just got, just a shelf to put it on, or set it on the counter, leave it in the warmest place you can think of, then it should do fine. Okay? Just needs time. It could be an hour, it could be 2. Only that will tell you what's going to happen. It has been about an hour and 10 minutes. Like I said, about 1 to 2 hours is what it normally takes on your first rise. If you'll notice, it has more than doubled, so that's what we're looking for, okay? At least doubled or more in bulk. Now what I want to do is I want to do what's called punching it down. And just basically you get to punch in the middle of it, and it's kind of fun, so you might as well enjoy it. And then I'm going to take that and we're going to divide it into 2 halves after we kind of get it into a workable size. So there we go. Isn't that neat? Don't you wish you could do that to some people? Anyway, let's not talk that way. Okay, I'm going to gently sprinkle a little bit of flour out here. Get some of that on my hands. Okay. Remember how I turned it under before? Just do that, and there we go. I now have a nice mass that is ready to be formed into the loaves and risen again. You can always guesstimate how much your cut is going to be, and that's a great way of doing it if you don't have any scales or anything like that. Just go ahead and take your dough knife and work right down through that and split it into 2 fairly equal halves. Let's see how close I got. Now I'm going to measure this in grams, kilograms. So, okay, 703 grams, 607 grams, 702. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to take some of this, stick it on that, 658, 650, good enough. Now, you don't have to make sure that they're perfectly matched like that. I mean, that's not necessary. But if you want to, you can. And that way, if you're doing 2 loaves at once, you get matching or close to matching or close to identical loaves. Now, let's take our dough that we've already pulled out. And all I'm going to do, I'm not going to work it anymore. I don't need to, okay? I want to roll it out, though, into the sheet that I'm going to turn into my loaf. If you'll notice, that's sticking to that. Okay, what does that mean? Let's get a little flour on it. There we go. I don't want it to be any wider than the bottom of my pan. So my maximum width on this whole thing needs to be no more than 8 inches at its widest point. Okay? See how smooth and satiny and elastic this dough is, guys? The smell is beautiful. I mean, it's just rocking good smelling. So, what I'm going to do now, we're going to work out our first one. Okay, guys, I just need to combine cinnamon and sugar. Now, go ahead. Now, I have my sugar ready. I'll need a spoon to sprinkle it over the top, and I need a knife to spread my butter. One thing I want to mention to you, when you're going to be making your cinnamon bread, you need to leave a little bit of the space on the outside free of butter, because we're going to wet that slightly, and as we roll it, we're going to mash it together, and that way it seals those edges and helps to hold in that wonderful filling, okay? First thing, let's get our butter, get it spread out across here. And I'm not looking for a massive thick coating of butter, and you shouldn't want one either. The whole idea here is just to give it a beautiful swirl on the inside, nice flavor. The butter itself is simply there to pretty much hold all of the stuff in place. It gives it a beautiful flavor too. Now I have another tool that I prefer to use. This is just a tool that's used for cake decorating, guys, but for stuff like this, it makes life a lot easier. If you'll notice, we had a little butter left over. Not a big deal. We're not going to lose any sleep. And that was all about all but 2 tablespoons of that butter. Now my cinnamon topping, just very gently sprinkle over. Okay guys, we have that all ready. Now what I want to do next is just wet those edges. I'm just going to wet my fingers with a little water and rub it down that edge. Now, so you'll know what I'm actually doing here. Remember, we used flour, and flour contains what we call gluten. Gluten is a protein. Proteins are sticky. So what I'm doing is I'm activating that sticky protein along the edge so that as I roll it up, that can then seal that edge down for me. Okay guys, at this point it's a matter of just roll it up and get it into their pans. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Just gently roll. And when I said seal the ends, do that as you go. Okay. Seal that end. See how I'll pull that over and tuck it in? And do the same on the other side. Just tuck in the inner layers and pull that top down over it and seal it. On the edge here, if you want, you can wet that end, and we seal it the same way. We pull it back and just work it down, okay? And I want to put that seam on the bottom in my pan. All I have to do is set these to rise again, okay? And I'm going to do the same I did last time. You saw how big and puffed up it got? It's exactly the way I want these before they go into the oven, okay? Okay guys, we're going to let that rise, and I'm going to cover them to begin with a simple towel. Okay guys, it has now been 1 hour and 10 minutes. Let's take a look. Oh, check that out. Isn't that beautiful? They've risen right up. They've more than doubled in bulk. So they're almost 3 times the bulk they were originally. Big, beautiful, gorgeous loaves. Now all I have to do is get these little guys right down in the oven. We're going to be cooking them at 375 degrees, and that's going to take 35 to 45 minutes. Well, that just depends. So in the oven they go. Here we are. There we go, guys. It's in the oven. 375 degrees. That should take about 35 to 45 minutes, okay? Now let me get my timer. I'm going to set mine for 35 minutes, and that way, when that happens, I'll come in here and check it. If it's not ready, I can always give it a little more time. Now, how do you know if bread is ready? Well, bread is a little different than a cake. You don't put a toothpick in it, okay? Because that method doesn't work on bread. Bread, you have to wait till it gets kind of firm and golden brown on top. You've seen the color of bread. And when you pull it out and you thump it gently, you'll hear a slightly hollow sound. It won't sound dead. Okay, so there we have it. My timer is set up. I'm just waiting for it to cook. Guys, these just now came out of the oven. You hear that sound? That's what we're looking for. Next thing I need to do is to turn these out. Now, of course, we greased these pans, so there shouldn't be any problems removing them. But remember, we were also cooking with sugar. And what does sugar do? But it leaks out of things, and then it sticks to other things, and it creates an irritating little mess. So sometimes those loaves can stick on the bottom if you allow the sugar to harden up. So what I'm going to try to do, provided life is fair to me, there we go. So you did that. Just going to go ahead and turn those right out of their pans. Remember this, you got to be careful. I'm rotating it over. I'm not lifting the loaf, I'm lifting the pan, and I'm rotating the loaf right back onto the, there we go, that wire rack. Okay guys, all I have to do is wait for those to finish cooling off. And frankly, my beautiful cinnamon swirl loaves are ready to go. Now how's that for a bread making lesson? Oh, there it is, guys. Cinnamon swirl bread. Big, beautiful, beautiful loaves of bread, guys. Let's slice it open and take a look. Okay, I want to get deep into the loaf here so we can see right into the heart of things. And I'm going to cut a slice so I can enjoy it. But before I grab my slice, let's take a look. Look how it rose up. Look how open and fluffy it is. Beautiful, guys. Exactly what I was hoping for. Beautiful cinnamon swirl loaf. And there's nothing, like I said, nothing that's quite like this. You can take it, toast it up. That beautiful tender crust that's browned. Lovely. The sweetness from all that sugar. Both the sugar in the dough itself, as well as in that beautiful swirl. The flavors, just banging good, guys. I'm going to be enjoying this, every bit of it. It's just so delicious. Wait till you try it. I tell you what, thank you so much for watching Texas Cooking today, guys. Thank you for watching this episode. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm going to have great recipes coming out weekly. All right, so just get ready for it. Good recipes, the great techniques that come with them. And if you would, please click the like button. I do appreciate that. I love it when I get comments. If you have a question, I'll do my best to answer you. So guys, if you would, just drop me a message or a question down below. And one last thing, if you would, please just have a happy day. Bye-bye.